The scissors made a sound I'll never forget. A sharp, metallic snip that cut through more than plastic. It cut through any illusion I still had that my marriage was salvageable, that my husband was a good man, that I deserved what was happening to me. I'm Alicia Chen, 34 years old, and I'm standing in the checkout line at Target on Roosevelt Road in Chicago at 3:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, watching my husband destroy my debit card with a pair of scissors he apparently brought to the store for exactly this purpose. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here, how a marriage that started with so much promise ended with public humiliation and a court case that would change everything. Let me tell you about the 24 hours between the sound of those scissors and the moment a judge made my husband regret every choice that led him to that Target checkout line. This is a story about financial abuse, legal justice, and what happens when you push a woman too far. My name is Alicia Chen, and I was born in San Francisco in 1990 to parents who'd immigrated from Taiwan in the 80s. My father was an engineer, my mother a pharmacist, and they raised my older brother Kevin and me with that particular brand of immigrant determination that said education was everything, success was mandatory, and family honor was paramount. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. My parents saved aggressively, invested wisely, and made sure Kevin and I had opportunities they'd never had. Piano lessons, math tutors, SAT prep courses, college funds that started the day we were born. The American dream, methodically planned and meticulously executed. I was a good daughter. Straight A's, UC Berkeley for undergrad, Northwestern for my MBA. I did everything right, followed every rule, made my parents proud. Got a job at a consulting firm in Chicago, worked 80-hour weeks, climbed the corporate ladder with the same determination my parents had brought to building their life in America. And then I met James Mitchell at a networking event in 2017. He was everything my parents wanted for me and everything I thought I wanted for myself. White, which my parents saw as upward mobility even if they'd never say it out loud. Educated, MBA from University of Chicago. Successful, VP of operations at a tech startup that was getting serious venture capital attention. Charming in that confident way that made you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room. We dated for a year before he proposed. Took me to Paris, got down on one knee in front of the Eiffel Tower, presented a ring that cost more than my car. It was perfect. He was perfect. We were perfect. We got married in June 2018 at the Peninsula Hotel in Chicago, an expensive wedding that our parents split, though my parents paid for significantly more because James's family was going through some financial difficulties. My mother had reservations about that, but I brushed them off. Every family had money problems sometimes. It didn't mean anything about James or our future. The first year of marriage was good. We bought a condo in Lincoln Park, one of those renovated units with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, and a mortgage that was aggressive but manageable. James's startup was doing well, my consulting career was thriving, and we were the kind of young professional couple that made our parents proud and our friends envious. We talked about having kids someday, about buying a bigger place in the suburbs, about building the kind of life our parents had built. Stable, successful, secure. But sometime during year 2, things started to shift in ways I didn't recognize as warning signs until much later. James's startup began having problems. The venture capital dried up, growth stalled, the CEO made some questionable decisions. James became stressed, distant, irritable. He'd come home late, drink more than usual, snap at me over small things. "I'm under a lot of pressure," he'd say when I asked if he was okay. "You don't understand what it's like, having all these responsibilities, all these people depending on me." I tried to be supportive, made his favorite dinners, gave him space when he needed it, didn't complain when he worked late or had to travel unexpectedly. I was a good wife, the way my mother had taught me to be, accommodating, understanding, putting his needs before my own. And then he lost his job. It was February 2020, right before the pandemic hit. The startup laid off 40% of its workforce, and James was one of them. He was devastated, his ego bruised, his identity as a successful professional shattered. "I'll find something else quickly," he said. "My network is strong, my resume is solid. This is just a temporary setback." But finding something else wasn't as easy as he'd thought. The pandemic hit a month later, the economy tanked, hiring freezes happened everywhere. James sent out hundreds of applications and got nowhere. 6 months turned into a year turned into 2 years. He was unemployed for 26 months, and during that time, everything changed. I became the sole breadwinner, which should have been fine. I made good money, my job was secure, we could survive on my income. But James couldn't handle it. Couldn't handle that his wife was supporting him, that he was financially dependent on me, that the traditional gender roles he'd internalized were reversed. He didn't say it directly, but I could feel his resentment growing. The way he'd make comments about my job being easy compared to what he'd done. The way he'd criticize how I spent money, even though it was my money paying all our bills. The way he'd act like my career was somehow less important than his non-existent one. And slowly, insidiously, he started taking control of our finances. It started small. "Let me handle the bills," he'd say. "You're so busy with work. You shouldn't have to worry about this stuff. I have time now. Let me take care of it." It seemed reasonable. I was working long hours, and he was home all day. Why not let him manage the household finances? So I did. I gave him access to our accounts, let him take over bill paying, stopped monitoring our money as closely as I should have. And that's when the financial abuse began. Though I didn't recognize it as abuse for a long time, James started controlling everything. He'd question every purchase I made. Why did I need new work clothes? Why did I go to lunch with coworkers? Why did I buy that book, that coffee, that lipstick? "We need to save money," he'd say. "I'm not working. We're on one income. You need to be more responsible." Never mind that I was paying for everything. Never mind that my salary was more than enough to cover our expenses and still save. Never mind that he wasn't working, but somehow always had money for the things he wanted. New tech gadgets, expensive whiskey, golf outings with his friends. He opened a joint credit card without telling me and ran up $15,000 in debt. When I found out, he said it was for household expenses, and I was being controlling by questioning him about it. He moved money from our savings account into accounts I didn't have access to. When I asked about it, he accused me of not trusting him, of treating him like a child, of being the kind of wife who needed to control everything. The gaslighting was constant and effective. He made me feel like I was the problem. Too controlling, too suspicious, too focused on money instead of trust. Made me feel guilty for wanting to know where our money was going, for being concerned about debt he was accumulating, for not blindly trusting his financial decisions. By year 3 of our marriage, 2021, a year into the pandemic, I'd lost complete visibility into our finances even though I was the one earning all the money. James had changed all the passwords, made himself the primary account holder, set up paperless billing so I wouldn't see statements. I was making 6 figures and living like I was broke because my husband controlled everything. I couldn't buy coffee without him commenting on it, couldn't go to Target for household supplies without him wanting to see the receipt, couldn't spend $1 of the money I earned without his permission. And if I pushed back, if I said this wasn't fair, that I should have access to my own money, he'd explode. Tell me I was ungrateful, that he was managing our household while I just worked, that I didn't appreciate everything he did for us. The emotional abuse was always just under the surface, ready to erupt if I challenged his control. My coworkers noticed. "Alicia, why are you bringing lunch from home every day?" My colleague Jennifer asked in late 2021. "You used to come to lunch with us all the time, just trying to save money. But you got that big promotion. You're making VP salary now. You can afford a $12 salad." I didn't know how to explain that my husband monitored every transaction, that going to lunch would mean a fight about wasting money, that it was easier to bring leftovers than deal with his anger. My parents noticed too. We'd go to dinner with them and James would make comments about the cost of the restaurant, about how we needed to be more frugal, about how I spent too much on things we didn't need. My mother would give me concerned looks but wouldn't say anything directly. Confrontation wasn't her style. My brother Kevin was less subtle. "What's going on with James?" he asked me in early 2022 during a rare phone call. "He's acting like a controlling asshole. He's just stressed about not working." It's been 2 years, Alicia. At some point, stress becomes who you are. He's sending out applications. It's hard out there. Is he, though? Because from what I can see, he's spending a lot of time playing golf and complaining about your spending while you're working 60 hours a week. I defended James because that's what I'd been conditioned to do. Defend my husband, protect the marriage, maintain the appearance that everything was fine. My parents had raised me to value family harmony above all else, and admitting my marriage was failing felt like admitting I'd failed. So I stayed quiet, made excuses, pretended everything was okay while my husband systematically took control of every aspect of our financial life. And then, in March 2022, James finally got a job. I thought things would get better. I thought having his own income again would ease the tension, would make him less controlling about money, would restore some balance to our relationship. I was wrong. If anything, James getting a job made things worse. Because now he had income again, but he kept complete control of my income too. We had separate bank accounts for our paychecks, but he maintained access to mine while locking me out of his. My money is for investments and savings, he'd say. Your money is for household expenses. Translated, his money was his to spend however he wanted, and my money was for everything else. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, his student loans, his credit card debt. I was making more than he was. I'd gotten another promotion in early 2022, was now making over $200,000 a year while he'd taken a job making $90,000, but I had less financial freedom than when I'd been a broke college student. Every purchase required his approval. He'd moved my direct deposit into an account he controlled, gave me a debit card tied to that account, and monitored every transaction. If I bought something he didn't approve of, he'd call me at work to interrogate me about it. Why did you spend $40 at Target yesterday? Household supplies, shampoo, paper towels, dish soap. That's too expensive. You need to shop at cheaper stores. James, we can afford Target. We make almost $300,000 combined. That's not the point. The point is you're wasteful and you don't respect the money we have. The fights became more frequent, more intense. He'd scream at me about spending, call me names, tell me I was financially irresponsible despite the fact that I'd been supporting us for 2 years. The emotional abuse that had been simmering was now boiling over regularly, and I was exhausted. Exhausted from working long hours and coming home to fights about money I'd earned. Exhausted from walking on eggshells, from monitoring every purchase, from having no financial autonomy despite being the higher earner. In September 2022, I did something I should have done years earlier. I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Kim, a Korean-American attorney who specialized in divorce and financial abuse cases. My coworker Jennifer had recommended her after I'd finally broken down at work and admitted what was happening at home. What you're describing is financial abuse, Jennifer had said. It's a form of domestic violence, and you need to talk to someone who can help you get out. I met Patricia in her office on a Wednesday afternoon, taking a long lunch that James would probably demand an explanation for later. Tell me what's happening, Patricia said after we'd exchanged pleasantries. And I told her everything. The controlling behavior, the monitoring of purchases, the lack of access to my own money, the separate account rules, the constant criticism and gaslighting about spending. Patricia took notes, her expression growing more serious with each detail. This is textbook financial abuse, she said when I finished. He's isolated you from your own resources, made you financially dependent on him despite the fact that you're the primary earner, and uses money as a tool of control and manipulation. But I have a job. I make good money. How can I be financially dependent on him when I'm the one with the high income? Financial dependence isn't about who earns more. It's about who controls access to resources. He controls your bank account, monitors your spending, punishes you for purchases he doesn't approve. That's dependence, regardless of where the money originates. So what do? You leave. You file for divorce, you get court orders protecting your assets, and you reclaim your financial autonomy. I can help you with all of that. He's going to be furious. He's going to be furious whether you leave now or in 5 years. The question is how much more of your life you're willing to give him. I left that meeting with paperwork to review, a retainer agreement to sign, and a knot in my stomach that told me my marriage was over. I'd known it for a while, but admitting it to a lawyer made it real. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering documentation, bank statements, credit card bills, mortgage records, tax returns, every piece of financial information I could access, which wasn't much given how thoroughly James had locked me out of our accounts. Patricia helped me strategize. We'd open a new bank account in my name only, redirect my direct deposit, file for divorce, and immediately request emergency financial orders from the court. The moment you file, things are going to escalate, Patricia warned. Men like your husband, when they realize they're losing control, they often do drastic things. You need to be prepared. Like what? Like emptying bank accounts, canceling credit cards, running up debt in your name. Anything to maintain control or punish you for leaving. How do I protect myself? We move fast. We file for divorce and request emergency orders all at once. We ask the court to freeze accounts, prevent him from incurring new debt, grant you access to marital funds. And we document everything he's done so the court understands the pattern of financial abuse. We set a date, October 15th, 2022. I'd file for divorce on a Friday, have him served over the weekend, and appear before a judge on Monday for emergency orders. But James figured it out before I could execute the plan. On October 12th, 3 days before I was supposed to file, I came home from work to find James waiting for me with printouts of bank statements. "What the fuck is this?" he said before I'd even closed the door. "What?" "This new bank account. The one you opened last week. The one you didn't tell me about." My stomach dropped. I'd been so careful, but somehow he'd found out. Maybe he'd been monitoring my email. Maybe the bank had sent something to our home address. Maybe I'd left a document somewhere. "James, you're planning to leave me, aren't you? You're hiding money." "I'm not hiding money. I opened an account in my name because I should have access to my own finances." "Your finances? There's no such thing as your finances. We're married. Everything is ours." "Then why don't I have access to your accounts? Why do you control everything?" His face went red. "Because you're irresponsible. Because you waste money. Because someone needs to make sure we're financially stable." "I've been financially stable my entire life. You're the one who ran up $15,000 in credit card debt. You're the one who hasn't let me see a bank statement in 2 years. Get out." "What?" "Get out of my house. If you want to leave so badly, leave right now. This is my house too. My name is on the mortgage. I don't care. Get out or I'm calling the police and telling them you're threatening me." I looked at my husband, this man I'd married 4 years ago, who I'd supported through unemployment, who I'd tried so hard to make happy, and I saw a stranger. Someone who was willing to lie to police, to falsely accuse me of threatening him, to use whatever tool he could to maintain control. "Fine," I said. "I'm leaving, but I'm taking my things." "No, you're not. Nothing in this house is yours. I paid for all of it. You paid for it with my money. Prove it." He stood between me and our bedroom, arms crossed, daring me to try to get past him. I weighed my options. Call the police myself, try to physically move past him, give up, and leave with nothing. I chose option 3. I walked out with just my purse and my phone, got in my car, and drove to my parents' house in Evanston. My mother opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without asking questions. My father appeared moments later, and I broke down completely. I told them everything. The financial control, the emotional abuse, the way James had systematically isolated me from my own resources, the new bank account, the divorce plan, the confrontation that had just happened. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" my mother asked, tears in her eyes. I was ashamed. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just tried harder. "This is not your fault," my father said firmly. He wasn't usually demonstrative with emotion, but his voice was shaking with anger. "This man has abused you, has stolen from you, has violated every vow he made." "I need to call my lawyer," I said. Patricia answered on the second ring, listened to what had happened, and moved into action. "We're filing tomorrow morning," she said. "First thing. And we're requesting emergency orders immediately. I'm also going to request the court hold him in contempt for locking you out of the marital home." "Can they do that?" "He can't just kick you out of a home you jointly own. That's illegal. And combined with the financial abuse we've already documented, I think we have a very strong case for immediate relief." The divorce papers were filed Friday morning, October 13th, 2022. James was served that afternoon at our condo. Patricia got a call from his lawyer, a man named Robert, something who apparently specialized in defending men in divorce cases, demanding to know why we'd filed. "Because your client is financially abusive and your client kicked my client out of the marital home," Patricia said. "We'll see you in court Monday for emergency orders." That weekend was the longest of my life. I stayed at my parents' house, jumping every time my phone rang, expecting James to show up or do something drastic. He did do something drastic, just not what I expected. On Sunday afternoon, I got a notification from our bank, the account James controlled, the one my paycheck was deposited into. A transfer of $93,000 to an account I didn't recognize. He'd emptied our savings. Every penny we'd accumulated during our marriage, gone. I called Patricia immediately. She wasn't surprised. "This is exactly what I said he might do. We'll bring it up tomorrow in court. Judges really don't like it when one spouse tries to hide marital assets during divorce proceedings. But that was our money. Money I earned. I know. And we're going to get it back." Monday morning, October 17th, 2022, I walked into the Daly Center courthouse with Patricia for our emergency hearing. James was already there with his lawyer, both of them looking smug and confident. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judith Martinez. She had a reputation for being tough but fair and not suffering fools or abusers. Patricia presented our case: the financial control James had exerted, the lack of access to my own income, the separate account rules, the monitoring of every purchase, the emotional abuse tied to spending, and finally, his kicking me out of the marital home and emptying our savings the moment divorce papers were filed. Your Honor, Patricia concluded, Mr. Mitchell has engaged in a sustained pattern of financial abuse throughout this marriage. He controlled Ms. Chen's income despite the fact that she was the primary, and for 2 years, the sole breadwinner. He monitored her spending, required her permission for purchases, locked her out of accounts, and gaslit her about her financial responsibility. And the moment she filed for divorce, he kicked her out of their home and stole $93,000 in marital savings. We're requesting emergency orders granting Ms. Chen access to marital funds, ordering Mr. Mitchell to return the money he took, and preventing him from incurring any new debt or transferring any assets. James's lawyer stood up. He was an older white man with an expensive suit and the kind of condescending tone that immediately made me want to punch him. Your Honor, Mr. Mitchell disputes these characterizations. He was managing household finances while unemployed, as any reasonable spouse would do. Ms. Chen is trying to punish him for losing his job during the pandemic, and now she's painting normal marital financial management as abuse because she regrets her decision to support him. Judge Martinez looked unimpressed. Counselor, are you claiming your client had authority to transfer $93,000 out of a joint account the day after being served with divorce papers? We're claiming that money was in his name. Was it in a joint account or his personal account? James's lawyer hesitated. Joint account, Your Honor, but then he had no authority to unilaterally withdraw it without his spouse's knowledge or consent, particularly after being served with divorce papers that effectively put him on notice that all assets were in dispute. What else do you have to say? Your Honor, Ms. Chen makes significantly more money than my client. She can afford to support herself. She's not being harmed by temporary lack of access to some accounts. She makes more money but has zero access to it because your client controls the account her paycheck is deposited into. Is that correct? The lawyer looked at James, who whispered something to him. Mr. Mitchell maintains that Ms. Chen has access to that account. Does she have the password, Counselor? Another whispered conference. No, Your Honor, but does she have a debit card? She did have a debit card, yes. I did have. Past tense. What happened to the debit card? Mr. Mitchell canceled it after she filed for divorce. Judge Martinez leaned back in her chair. So let me make sure I understand. Ms. Chen earns over $200,000 annually. Her paycheck goes into an account her husband controls. He changed the password so she can't access online banking. He canceled her debit card when she filed for divorce. He kicked her out of the marital home. And he transferred $93,000 out of their joint savings into an account she doesn't have access to. And you're arguing this isn't financial abuse? Your Honor, my client was protecting marital assets. From his spouse? Counselor, you can't protect marital assets from the other person who owns them. That's called theft. I felt something in my chest loosen. The judge saw it. She understood what James had been doing. Judge Martinez turned to James directly. Mr. Mitchell, did you kick your wife out of your shared home 3 days ago? James stood up. He'd probably been coached to be respectful and remorseful, but his natural arrogance came through. Your Honor, my wife was being threatening and I felt unsafe. Did she threaten you verbally? She was acting erratic. Did she threaten you physically? Not exactly, but did she destroy property? No, but Your Honor, she was planning to divorce me and I felt… You felt what, Mr. Mitchell? Entitled to kick your wife out of her own home because she was planning to exercise her legal right to divorce you? James's lawyer stood up quickly. Your Honor, my client was under stress. We're all under stress, Counselor. It doesn't give us the right to illegally evict our spouses or steal marital assets. Mr. Mitchell, did you transfer $93,000 out of a joint savings account on Sunday? Yes, but why? To protect it. From whom? From her. From my wife. She was going to take everything. It was already half hers, Mr. Mitchell. You can't take what already belongs to someone. Here's what's going to happen. Judge Martinez pulled out a form and started writing. I'm issuing an emergency order effective immediately. Mr. Mitchell, you will return your wife to the marital home by 6 p.m. today. You will return all $93,000 to the joint savings account by tomorrow morning. You will provide Ms. Chen with complete access to all financial accounts, including passwords and debit cards. You will not incur any new debt, transfer any assets, or close any accounts without mutual consent or court order. Do you understand? Your Honor, that's not fair. Fair? Judge Martinez looked up from her writing, and her expression made James take a step back. Fair is what you should have been during your marriage. Fair is not financially abusing your wife for 3 years. Fair is not monitoring her every purchase while hiding your own spending. Fair is not stealing her money the moment she tries to leave. You want to talk about fair, Mr. Mitchell? Your Honor, I'm just trying to protect myself. From what? From the consequences of your own abusive behavior? You should have thought about that before you decided to treat your wife like an ATM you could control. This hearing is over. Emergency orders are granted. You have until 6 p.m. today to allow Ms. Chen back into the marital home, and until 9 a.m. tomorrow to return all funds to the joint account. If you don't comply, I'll hold you in contempt, and you'll be fined $1,000 per day until you do. She banged her gavel, and just like that, it was over. Patricia and I walked out of that courtroom, and I felt like I could breathe for the first time in 3 years. The judge had seen everything, had called James out on every lie, had given me back immediate access to my own life. That went well, Patricia said with a smile. She destroyed him. Judge Martinez doesn't play around with financial abuse cases. She's seen too many women destroyed by men who use money as a weapon. She won't tolerate it in her courtroom. What happens now? Now James has to comply with the court orders or face contempt charges, and we move forward with the divorce. This emergency hearing just established that the court sees his behavior as abusive, which means we have strong leverage for the final settlement. I went back to my parents' house and waited. At 5:30 p.m., James texted me, "You can come get your stuff." Not, "Please come home," not, "I'm sorry," not even a basic acknowledgement that he'd been forced by court order to allow me back. Just a passive-aggressive text treating me like an intruder in my own home. I drove to our condo with my father. I didn't want to face James alone. When we walked in, James was sitting on the couch with a beer, watching TV like nothing had happened. "I need my keys," I said. He pulled them out of his pocket and threw them at me. "Your stuff is in the bedroom. I packed it up for you. This is my home too. I'm not getting my stuff. I'm living here." "The hell you are." "The court order says I have access to the marital home. That means I can be here. Then I'm leaving." "Fine." He stood up, grabbed a bag that was clearly already packed, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "You're going to regret this. Taking me to court, embarrassing me in front of that judge. You think you won today? You have no idea what's coming." He left, slamming the door hard enough that a picture fell off the wall. My father picked up the picture. It was from our wedding, both of us smiling, looking hopeful about our future. "You want to keep this?" he asked. "No, I want to burn it." We didn't burn it, but I did put it in a box in the closet along with all the other mementos from our marriage that I couldn't look at anymore. That night, I checked our bank accounts. James had complied with the court order. All $93,000 was back in the joint savings account. He'd also restored my access to online banking and hadn't closed the account my paycheck was deposited into. But I could see his rage in how he'd complied. He'd taken screenshots of every transaction I'd made in the past 3 years, clearly planning to use them against me somehow. He'd transferred his personal money out of any joint accounts into accounts I couldn't see. He was preparing for war, and I was ready. The next day, Tuesday, October 18th, I went to work for the first time since Friday. My colleagues knew something was happening. I'd been absent mentally for weeks, had taken time off suddenly, looked exhausted and stressed. Jennifer pulled me aside at lunch. "How are you doing?" "Really?" I told her about the hearing, about Judge Martinez, about James having to return the money and give me access to the home. "Oh my God, you got court orders already? That fast?" "Emergency hearing. Patricia said it was critical to move quickly." "What happens next?" "Now we negotiate the divorce settlement, division of assets, who gets what, all of that." "Does he want the condo?" "I have no idea what he wants, but I know what I want. My money back, my freedom back, and my life back." I started seeing a therapist that week. Her name was Dr. Sofia Rodriguez, and she specialized in trauma recovery from domestic abuse. I'd resisted the term domestic abuse for so long, had thought it only meant physical violence, had convinced myself that what James was doing wasn't that bad, because he never hit me. Dr. Rodriguez helped me understand that financial abuse was domestic violence, that controlling someone's access to money, monitoring their purchases, using resources as punishment, all of it was abuse, that the psychological damage was real and valid, even without physical bruises. "You've been traumatized," she told me in our first session, "and trauma doesn't care whether the weapon was fists or finances. Your body and brain experience threat, control, helplessness. That's trauma." Learning that language, having my experience validated as abuse rather than just a bad marriage, changed something fundamental in me. I stopped making excuses for James, stopped minimizing what he'd done, stopped blaming myself for not being a better wife. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings continued. Patricia and James's lawyer exchanged financial disclosures, asset lists, proposed settlement terms. James wanted half of everything, half the value of the condo, half my retirement account, half of our savings, spousal support because I made more money than him. He's delusional if he thinks he's getting any of that, Patricia said. We have documentation of financial abuse, we have a court order acknowledging his behavior, and we have proof he tried to steal marital assets. No judge is going to give him half of what you built while he was controlling and abusing you. But James's lawyer was pushing hard. Multiple depositions, demands for financial records going back years, threats of taking everything to trial if we didn't settle on their terms. Let them threaten trial, Patricia said. I would love to put James on the stand and have him explain to a judge why he thinks he deserves half of your retirement account after spending 3 years financially abusing you. In November, something happened that changed everything. I was at Target on a Tuesday afternoon, picking up household supplies. I'd moved back into the condo, but James was staying elsewhere. At his parents' house, I'd heard through mutual acquaintances. We were living separately, but still legally married, still technically sharing financial accounts even though I'd moved my paycheck to my new personal account. I was in the checkout line with a cart full of normal purchases, cleaning supplies, toiletries, some groceries. The total came to $137. I pulled out my debit card, the one tied to the joint account that still had some of my money in it. And then James appeared. I don't know how he knew I was there. Maybe he'd been following me. Maybe he'd tracked my location somehow. Maybe it was awful coincidence. But he walked up behind me in line carrying a pair of scissors. Don't use that card, he said. Every person in line turned to look. James, what are you doing here? I said don't use that card. That account is mine. It's a joint account. I have every right to use it. No, you don't. The cashier, a young woman who looked deeply uncomfortable, tried to intervene. Sir, if you're not checking out, you need to step out of line. I need to make sure my wife doesn't steal from me, James said loudly enough for everyone around us to hear. I felt my face burn with embarrassment. Everyone was staring, whispering, pulling out phones. James, you need to leave. Give me the card. No. Give me the fucking card, Alicia. The manager appeared, drawn by the commotion. Sir, you need to lower your voice. And that's when James grabbed the scissors he'd been holding and took my debit card right out of my hand. Before I could stop him, before anyone could stop him, he cut the card in half. The sound of those scissors cutting through plastic echoed in that store like a gunshot. Everyone went silent. The manager froze. The cashier's mouth dropped open. And I stood there watching my husband destroy my access to my own money in front of dozens of witnesses. There, James said, dropping the 2 halves of the card on the conveyor belt. Problem solved. You can't spend money that isn't yours. I looked at him, at this man I'd married, who I'd supported, who I'd tried so hard to love, and something in me snapped. That wasn't yours to destroy. Everything in that account is mine. You gave up rights to it when you filed for divorce. That's not how divorce works, James. Call the police, he said to the manager. My wife is trying to steal from me. The manager looked at me, looked at James, clearly trying to figure out what was happening. Sir, I think you need to leave. I'm not leaving until she promises not to use any of our money. If you're still watching this story unfold, thank you for being here. Hit that subscribe button now because what happens next is going to show you exactly what happens when you financially abuse someone who knows their rights and isn't afraid to fight back. I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. James just cut up my debit card in the middle of Target, I said when she answered. He what? Cut it up, with scissors, in front of witnesses, and then told the manager to call the police because I'm trying to steal from him. Patricia was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then, don't leave, don't pay for your items, don't do anything except wait for me to get there. I'm calling the police myself and I'm heading to you now. What Target are you at? I told her. Then I stood there in that checkout line with everyone staring at me, with James pacing nearby looking self-righteous, with the 2 halves of my debit card sitting on the conveyor belt like evidence at a crime scene. The police arrived first. 2 officers, both looking tired and annoyed to be dealing with what probably seemed like a domestic dispute in a retail store. What's going on here? The older officer asked. James jumped in before I could speak. My wife is trying to use our joint account without permission. We're getting divorced and she's trying to steal money from me. That's not what happened, I said calmly. We have a joint account. I have every legal right to use it. My husband followed me here, took my card, and destroyed it because he's trying to control my access to our marital funds. It's my money, James insisted. It's a joint account, I repeated, and we have court orders about financial access. He's violating those orders. Do you have documentation of these court orders? The officer asked. My lawyer is on her way with them. Patricia arrived 10 minutes later with a folder full of documents. She showed the officers the emergency orders from October, explained the pattern of financial abuse, explained that James had just violated court orders by destroying my access to a joint account. The officers looked at James. Sir, if there are court orders saying your wife has access to joint accounts, you can't take her card and destroy it. But she's spending my money? It's joint money, sir. That means it's both of yours. You need to leave this store now. I want her arrested for theft. Sir, she hasn't committed any crime. You, however, may have violated court orders. I suggest you leave before we have to take further action. James looked at the officers, at me, at Patricia, at the growing crowd of Target shoppers watching this drama unfold. His face was red with rage and humiliation. This isn't over, he said before storming out. After James left, Patricia turned to the manager. I need you to preserve your security footage from today. All angles showing what just happened. We're going to need it for court. Is she in trouble? The manager asked, gesturing to me. No, but he's going to be when we get in front of a judge again. Patricia drove me home. I was shaking, adrenaline and humiliation and anger coursing through me. What happens now? I asked. Now we file an emergency motion for contempt. James violated court orders by destroying your access to marital funds, and we request sanctions, financial penalties for his behavior. Will the judge actually penalize him? Oh, yes. Especially since he did it so publicly, in front of witnesses and when police were called. This isn't he said, she said. We have objective evidence of him violating court orders. Patricia filed the motion that evening. We were back in front of Judge Martinez the next morning, Wednesday, November 16th, 2022. James arrived with his lawyer, both of them looking less confident than at the first hearing. Judge Martinez had the security footage from Target queued up on a laptop, and she played it for the entire courtroom. Watching it was surreal. Seeing myself standing there, seeing James grab my card, seeing those scissors cut through plastic, seeing the crowd's reaction. It looked even worse on video than it had felt in the moment. When the video ended, Judge Martinez looked at James with an expression that would have made me confess to crimes I didn't commit. Mr. Mitchell, can you explain to me what I just watched? James stood up. Your Honor, my wife was about to spend money from our joint account without my permission. Does she need your permission to access a joint account? We're getting divorced, Your Honor. The assets need to be protected. I issued orders on October 17th requiring you to provide your wife with access to all financial accounts. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, but... And on November 15th, you took a debit card linked to a joint account out of her hand and destroyed it. Is that correct? She was going to spend... Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And when police arrived, you demanded they arrest your wife for theft, even though she was attempting to use a joint account she has legal access to. Is that correct? James's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client was trying to prevent dissipation of marital assets. By taking his wife's debit card and cutting it up with scissors in public. That's not preventing dissipation, counselor. That's financial abuse, and it's a violation of my court orders. She turned back to James. Mr. Mitchell, I gave you clear instructions. You were to provide your wife with access to all financial accounts. That means functioning access, not access that you can revoke whenever you feel like it. When you destroyed her debit card, you violated my orders. Your Honor, I was protecting our money. From your wife? From the person who earned most of it? Mr. Mitchell, let me be very clear. Your wife has a legal right to access joint marital funds. You do not have the authority to take that access away by destroying her debit cards, changing passwords, or any other method. Do you understand? But how am I supposed to protect myself? From what? From your wife accessing money she earned? You don't need protection from that. What you need is to understand that your behavior constitutes financial abuse, that it's illegal, and that I will not tolerate it in cases before my court. Judge Martinez started writing. Here's my ruling. Mr. Mitchell, you are in contempt of court for violating my October 17th orders. You will pay a fine of $5,000 to be paid directly to your wife within 7 days. You will also pay all of your wife's attorney fees related to this contempt motion. I'm estimating that at around $10,000 based on what I know of Ms. Kim's rates. Additionally, Because you destroyed your wife's debit card, you will pay her $500 for the inconvenience of having to get a new one. James's face went white. Your Honor, that's over $15,000. Yes, Mr. Mitchell. That's what happens when you violate court orders and financially abuse your spouse. You pay for it. Literally. I don't have that kind of money. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to pull a stunt with scissors and Target. Payment is due within 7 days. If it's not paid in full, I'll add interest of $500 per day until it is. She banged her gavel. We're done here. Mr. Mitchell, if you violate any more of my orders, the penalties will be significantly more severe. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, James said quietly. Good. Get out of my courtroom. We left the courthouse and I felt like I was floating. Judge Martinez had not only held James in contempt, she'd imposed significant financial penalties. $15,000 that he had to pay me within a week. That was amazing, I said to Patricia. That was Judge Martinez being sick of men who abuse their wives financially. She doesn't mess around. Will he actually pay? He'll pay, because if he doesn't, he'll owe even more. $500 a day adds up fast. James paid within 6 days. I got notifications from my bank. $5,000 for the contempt fine, $10,000 for attorney fees, $500 for the replacement card, $15,500 total, all because he'd cut up my debit card in Target. The divorce settlement negotiations changed dramatically after that hearing. James's lawyer stopped making aggressive demands and started trying to negotiate reasonable terms. They knew they had no leverage, knew any judge would side with me given the documented abuse and the contempt ruling. We reached a settlement in January 2023. I got the condo, my full retirement account, and $65,000 of the $93,000 in savings. A bit more than half because the court agreed I'd contributed more and because James's behavior had been abusive. James got his car, his retirement account, $28,000 in cash, and no spousal support. He also had to pay an additional $10,000 in my attorney fees as part of the settlement, on top of what he'd already paid for the contempt motion. The divorce was finalized in February 2023, just 4 months after I'd filed. Fast for a divorce, but Patricia said that's what happens when one party has documented abuse and the other party has violated court orders. I was free. Legally, financially, emotionally free. The months after the divorce were strange. I had to relearn how to make financial decisions without second-guessing myself, without hearing James's voice in my head criticizing every purchase. I had to rebuild my relationship with money and stop seeing every transaction as a potential trigger for abuse. Dr. Rodriguez helped me understand that financial trauma was real, that I'd been conditioned to associate spending with punishment, that it would take time to feel safe with my own resources again. I started small, went to coffee shops without guilt, bought new clothes without justifying each item, took myself to nice dinners without worrying about whether I'd have to explain it later. Slowly, gradually, I reclaimed my financial autonomy. In March 2023, I got a call from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Rachel, and she'd been married to James briefly before me. I know this is weird, she said, but I heard about your divorce through mutual friends, about the financial abuse, the court case, all of it, and I needed to call you because he did the same thing to me. What? James. When we were married from 2015 to 2016, he controlled all our money, monitored my spending, made me ask permission for everything. I thought I was crazy. I thought it was just me being bad with money like he said. How did you get out? I left after 8 months. I couldn't take it anymore. But I didn't have the courage to do what you did. Take him to court, document everything, fight back. I just left and tried to forget about it. I'm sorry he did that to you. I'm sorry he did it to you too. But I wanted to thank you for fighting back, for making it public, for showing that what he does is abuse and it's not okay. You probably saved his next victim from going through what we went through. After we hung up, I realized Rachel was right about one thing. James had a pattern. I wasn't his first victim, and I probably wouldn't have been his last if I hadn't fought back so publicly, if Judge Martinez hadn't made such a clear record of his abusive behavior. That call inspired me to do something I'd been considering for months. I started speaking publicly about financial abuse. It started small, a blog post about my experience, published anonymously, that went viral in financial independence and divorce circles. Then a talk at a women's professional group. Then a workshop at a domestic violence shelter teaching women how to recognize and document financial abuse. I partnered with Patricia to create resources for women leaving financially abusive relationships, checklists for gathering documentation, guides for opening separate bank accounts safely, step-by-step instructions for getting emergency court orders. By the end of 2023, I'd spoken at a dozen events, been interviewed for articles about financial abuse in marriage, and helped create a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting survivors of economic abuse. The work was healing in a way I hadn't expected, turning my pain into purpose, helping other women avoid or escape what I'd been through. It gave meaning to everything I'd suffered. I also started dating again, cautiously. I'd learned what red flags to watch for, what questions to ask about financial values and practices, how to maintain my autonomy while building partnership. In October 2023, I met someone who felt different. His name was David Park, a Korean-American architect who'd been divorced for 3 years. He was open about his finances from the start, believed in separate accounts and transparent communication, and never once questioned my spending or made me feel guilty about having nice things. "I make good money," he said on our third date when I offered to split an expensive dinner check. "And so do you. We can both afford to treat each other. But I also want you to know I'll never expect you to account for every dollar you spend. That's not how partnership works." I almost cried at the table. The idea that someone thought financial autonomy was normal, that they wouldn't monitor or control or punish, it was revolutionary after years of James. By early 2024, David and I were serious. He met my family, I met his. We talked about future and partnership and building a life together. But we also talked about keeping separate finances, about protecting our individual autonomy, about learning from past relationships. "I never want you to feel controlled by me," he said one night. "If anything I do ever makes you feel like you don't have access to your own resources, I want you to tell me immediately." "I will, but I trust you. You're nothing like my ex-husband." "Good, because that guy was a nightmare, and you deserved so much better." In May 2024, I got an unexpected message on LinkedIn from Shanice Miller, not the same Shanice from the other story, but a different woman who'd been married to James after me. Wait, after me? Apparently James had remarried quickly after our divorce. Some woman he'd met at work, married within 6 months, divorced within a year. And according to Shanice's message, he'd done the exact same things to her, controlled her money, monitored her spending, made her ask permission for every purchase. "I left when he tried to cancel my credit cards," she wrote, "but I wish I'd taken him to court like you did. I wish I'd made him pay for what he did. Instead, I just left and he's telling everyone I was the crazy one." I wrote back with Patricia's contact information and all the resources I'd developed. Encouraged her to pursue legal action if she felt safe doing so, to document everything, to not let him get away with abuse just because they were no longer married. She thanked me and said she'd think about it. A month later, she messaged again to say she'd hired Patricia and was filing a civil suit against James for financial abuse during their marriage. "I'm not letting him do this to another woman," she wrote. "He needs to face consequences." I couldn't agree more. By the summer of 2024, 2 years after that day in Target, I was living a completely different life. I'd been promoted at work, was making over $250,000 a year, had complete autonomy over my finances. I'd bought a house, not a condo, but an actual house in Oak Park with a yard and space and no memories of James. David had moved in with me in August, but we kept separate finances by mutual agreement. We split household costs fairly, supported each other's financial goals, and never once questioned each other's spending. I was happy. Actually, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't been during my entire marriage to James. In September 2024, I got a call from Patricia with unexpected news. "Shanice's lawsuit against James is moving forward," she said, "and the judge in that case wants to use your case as precedent. The contempt ruling, the sanctions, all of it. It's going to help establish that what James does is a pattern of financial abuse, not just isolated incidents." That's good, right? That's excellent. It means James is going to face consequences for abusing multiple women, and it might prevent him from doing it to anyone else. The civil suit was settled in November 2024. James had to pay Shanice $60,000 in damages, plus her attorney fees. Combined with what he'd paid me in contempt fines and attorney fees, he'd now paid out nearly $100,000 in penalties for financial abuse. "Do you think he learned anything?" I asked Patricia over coffee after Shanice's settlement was announced. "Probably not. Men like James rarely do, but at least he's paying for it, literally, and every woman he dates from now on can Google him and find out exactly who he is." She was right. James Mitchell's name was now permanently associated with financial abuse, contempt of court, multiple settlements. Any woman who did even basic research before getting involved with him would find red flags everywhere. In December 2024, I was invited to give a TED Talk about financial abuse in intimate relationships. I'd spent 2 years building expertise, helping dozens of women, becoming a recognized voice in this space. The talk was filmed in January 2025, in front of a live audience that included my parents, David, Patricia, and many of the women I'd worked with through my advocacy. I told my story, the gradual loss of financial autonomy, the control James exerted, the moment I found a lawyer, the emergency orders, and finally, that day in Target when he cut up my card. That moment in Target was my lowest point, I said. Public humiliation, everyone staring, feeling completely helpless while my husband destroyed my access to my own money. But it was also my turning point, because that act was so egregious, so clearly abusive, so well documented, that a judge held him in contempt and made him pay $15,000 in penalties within a week. I talked about Judge Martinez and her refusal to tolerate financial abuse in her courtroom, about Patricia and her strategic brilliance in documenting everything, about the importance of emergency orders and moving fast when you're trying to escape financial control. Financial abuse is domestic violence, I concluded. It's not less serious because there are no physical bruises. It's not less damaging because the weapon is money instead of fists. And it's not less worthy of legal intervention and criminal consequences. I talked about what women should look for: partners who monitor spending, who restrict access to joint accounts, who make unilateral financial decisions, who use money as punishment or control. If your partner makes significantly less money than you but controls all the finances, that's a red flag. If you have to ask permission to buy coffee with money you earned, that's abuse. If your partner changes passwords or cancels cards without your consent, that's illegal. And if your partner tells you you're overreacting or being controlling when you ask for basic financial transparency, they're gaslighting you. The audience response was overwhelming. Standing ovation, people crying, multiple women lining up afterward to share their own stories of financial abuse and to ask for resources. The TED Talk was posted online in March 2025. Within days, it had millions of views. Within weeks, it had sparked national conversation about financial abuse and coercive control in relationships. I received thousands of messages from women who'd experienced similar abuse, from lawyers asking for the resources Patricia and I had created, from judges saying they wish they'd known about these patterns earlier in their careers, from men who'd been financially abused and hadn't known they could seek help. And one message from James: "You've ruined my life," it said. "No one will date me now. Everyone thinks I'm an abuser because of your lies. I hope you're happy." I blocked him without responding, because what he'd written was almost funny in its lack of self-awareness. People thought he was an abuser because he was an abuser. His reputation was ruined because he'd ruined it himself through his own actions. The consequences he was facing were the direct result of his choices, not my documentation of those choices. By mid-2025, 3 years after the Target incident, I was engaged to David. He proposed on a trip to Taiwan, in front of the temple where my grandparents had gotten married in 1952. "I promise to be your partner, not your controller," he said when he got down on one knee. "To support your financial independence, not undermine it. To celebrate your success, not resent it. To build a life with you based on mutual respect and complete transparency." I said yes, crying, thinking about how different this proposal was from James's in Paris. How this time, I knew what I was saying yes to. How this time, I'd learned what real partnership looked like. We got married in October 2025 at a small ceremony in Oak Park. My parents walked me down the aisle. Patricia was there, celebrating the client who'd become a friend. Women I'd helped through my advocacy work attended, celebrating not just my wedding, but the life I'd rebuilt. During the reception, my father gave a toast that made everyone cry. When Alicia told us what she was going through in her first marriage, I felt like I'd failed her, he said. Like I should have seen it earlier, should have taught her better, should have protected her. But what I realized is that Alicia didn't need protection. She needed support, and when she decided to fight back, to document everything, to take him to court, that's when I knew she'd be okay. Not because someone saved her, but because she saved herself. Later that night, dancing with David while our loved ones celebrated around us, I thought about that Tuesday afternoon in Target 3 years ago, about standing in that checkout line while my husband cut up my debit card, about the humiliation, the helplessness, the rage. That moment had felt like rock bottom, but it had also been the catalyst for everything that came after. The emergency hearing, the contempt ruling, the $15,000 in penalties, the divorce settlement, the advocacy work, the TED Talk, this new life with someone who actually valued my autonomy. My husband cut my card at checkout, and by sunrise the next morning, the court had refilled every dollar with penalties. But more importantly, the court had given me something more valuable than money. It had given me validation, justice, and the legal backing to reclaim my life. Judge Martinez had seen what James was doing and called it what it was: abuse. She'd made him pay for it financially and held him accountable legally. And in doing so, she'd sent a message that financial abuse was serious, was illegal, and wouldn't be tolerated. That message had changed my life, had changed the lives of the women I'd helped since then, had maybe even changed the way some courts thought about economic coercion in intimate relationships. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for witnessing my journey. Hit that like button if this resonated with you, subscribe if you want to hear more stories about survival and justice, and turn on notifications because the fight against financial abuse is ongoing. I'm Alicia Chenpark now, 37 years old, living in Oak Park with a husband who respects my autonomy and a career helping other women escape what I escaped. I've written a book about recognizing and leaving financially abusive relationships. I've trained lawyers and judges on patterns of economic coercion. I've helped create legislative change around financial abuse recognition in divorce proceedings. And it all started with a pair of scissors, a Target checkout line, and a judge who refused to let a man get away with abuse just because his weapon of choice was money instead of violence. James Mitchell cut up my debit card on November 15, 2022. By November 16, 2022, he'd been held in contempt and ordered to pay me $15,500. By February 2023, he'd paid me over $30,000 total in fines, fees, and settlement penalties. He thought he was taking my power away when he cut that card. Instead, he handed me evidence that would destroy him in court and fuel a career helping other women fight back. That's what happens when you abuse someone who knows their rights, documents everything, and has access to Judge Martinez's courtroom. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, if someone is controlling your access to money, monitoring your spending, or using finances as a weapon, that's abuse. You don't have to live with it, you don't deserve it, and there are legal remedies available. Trust yourself. Document everything, get a good lawyer, and never ever let anyone convince you that controlling your own money makes you a bad partner. You have the right to financial autonomy. You have the right to access resources you've earned, and you have the right to leave anyone who tries to take those rights away. I'm living proof that you can survive financial abuse, fight back successfully, and build a life you actually want to live. My husband cut my card at checkout. The court refilled every dollar with penalties, and I rebuilt my entire life with justice as my foundation. That's my story, that's my testimony, that's my truth. God bless, and remember, scissors can cut plastic, but they can't cut through your rights, your worth, or your future. You are stronger than you know.